a fascinating and probably underrated topic. We're talking about the walk and specifically the power of the walk with the leading expert on the topic. Diana Waters is here and she literally has a business called The Power of Walk. And she's going to dive into all of the benefits of the walk and what you can expect to see if you really lean into this approach. And I'm so excited. I know members have been really excited for this one and submitted a number of questions ahead of time. I personally am really excited for this one. So, Diana, thank you so much for taking the time to go into this with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me along, Jessa.
To start, will you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and your career?
Yeah, of course. I originally trained as a British Horse Society instructor, um, and I um, went down the route of slow walk work as a result of something that happened with my Icelandic horse, which is kind of on a completely different topic. I was entering a competition with my Icelandic horse Swala, and I wanted to work on his tolt. So Icelandic horses have an extra gait called the tolt, which is a running walk. And I had realized his tolt tended to be a little bit pacey, which is a little bit similar to when the walk gets a bit pacey, when it's been kind of overly compressed in the dressage world. We sometimes see that where it's a little bit too beat and a little bit lateral. And he had that slight tendency in the tolt. And when I broke it down, I realized that it was coming from a kind of combination of tension and falling on the forehand. And I had this idea that maybe if I could get him to really slow down and balance, but without feeling held and compressed, so that I could get him to take one step at a time under his own balance, as opposed to being held somewhere or hurried along somewhere or pushed somewhere. So I just kind of had this instinct to try it. And I sort of built up to it gradually, sort of building his confidence and asking him to go slower and slower until I could get to a stage where I could just off the lightest stage, just ask him to take a single slow step. And he went into this lovely balance. And then my idea was I was going to take that forward into the tolt and the other gates. But it actually just seemed to happen by itself. It seemed to reorganize his body, and his tolt was beautiful. And we actually won the British Championships that year. So that was kind of my very first introduction to what I now call slow walk work. And sort of fast forward a few years, because I carried on with my British Horse Society work, and I found some of that to be a little too kind of forceful for what I would like to do. I wanted to do things in a gentler and more beautiful way. Um, and I went searching for a better way to do things, and I met Heather Moffat, who's now my mentor, and I went to study as a working pupil with her, and I learned so many things with her. But one of the things that really stood out was experiencing the school walk on her horse Sudi. So the school walk is it's like slowed down, slow motion, very, very light footed, like cat like movement. It's really, really beautiful. It's really smooth. And when you're riding it, it feels as if you're kind of connected to the horse just through your seat, and that you can move wherever you want to go just by thinking about it. So that was kind of exactly what I had visualized doing. And it was actually very similar to what I'd done with my Icelandic horse Swala. So I was really, really interested in that. And when I went home, I started trying it out with my horses and my clients' horses. And what I discovered was that although not all horses are at the level of education to carry out slow walk work, um, all of the horses were showing these amazing improvements as a result of just kind of following those concepts of slowing down the walk without restricting it. So, in order to slow it down without restricting it, you then have to go down a whole nother rabbit hole of how to help the horse to become very, very regulated and synchronized and together with you and very trusting, so that you can gradually um, almost allow them to slow down and really go into quite a deep meditative state. So I really started exploring that a lot more, and I found it instantly helped with so many things. So I started incorporating it, or with in hand and figuring out how to do that in hand, which I found really helped. And then when I was riding, I just found that I could sort out all these problems which usually require, an increased inside leg and increased outside rein. All of the things increased. I found that I could actually solve them. So I could straighten the horse, stop the falling in, lift the forehand, all of those things by slowing and lightening the aids instead of by increasing the aids and pushing forward.
Wow, this has been a journey.
Yeah.
So the slow walk that you're doing with the horses, tell me, and you've touched on it a little bit, but tell me what the outcomes people can expect are near term and long term. So is this to make a horse more balanced and on their hind end, with dressage being kind of the desired output? Or tell us kind of all of the benefits people could expect once they're starting to do regular slow walk work with their horse, and maybe what the long-term vision is.
Yeah. So the original thing which really attracted me to it was that it transforms your schooling sessions, particularly in dressage, because it gives you a tool where you can make those corrections very quickly and easily and lightly. So raising the forehand and straightening the horse are the main two things. And obviously everything that comes with that, so like the horse becoming rounder, lighter, softer in the contact, all of those things, and more responsive to the aids. So that was the thing which I absolutely loved about it. But when I started doing it, I discovered quite a few other benefits. So for example, my horse Flicker was very, very crooked, even just moving out in the field. I started videoing her because I noticed she would move with her rib cage carried out to one side and her head bent to the other side and like a little kink in her body. And when I started slow walk work with her, that resolved itself and she became straight. She also had cow hocks, which straightened out as well. I've had horses that have had very sway backs, which have become straighter, horses that have had kissing spines, which have resolved. So it has some sort of side effects as well to it just improving the horse's general the health of their body and their well-being.
Those are incredible transformations to hear about. What is a slow walk compared to a lazy walk? Because if I think of a slow walk without context, I can picture some horses certainly slowing down a lot, but then starting to trip and just not being thoughtful. So describe to us
Mm.
a good slow walk in the practice that you're talking about, and then describe to us where it could be less productive if people are kind of missing the mark on some of the features that make it a proper slow walk.
Mm. So it's interesting. I think this question has two parts to it because I'm going to start with a difference and then I'm going to explain why you don't need to worry about a difference. So
Mm.
the difference is that slow, the lazy walk will tend to be quite heavy footed. The horse will kind of fall forward over the front legs instead of lifting them and carrying them out in front of them. They might, as you say, they might trip, they might drag the hind legs. And the slow walk, there's quite a lot of lift to each step. So they pick up their feet carefully. They, in particular, extend their front feet out in front of them, and then they place the foot very softly on the ground. So that's how they look different. But what I've found in our horse world, we are so conditioned to not allow horses to be lazy that a lot of people don't ever arrive at the slow walk because they're worried that the walk is too lazy. And the slow walk often evolves from a lazy walk. So I never correct a lazy walk. The reasons why the horse is dragging the legs or tripping is usually because there is bracing in their body, which is stopping them from bending their joints correctly. That bracing very often starts in the neck and the poll and the jaw, and my slow walk work program incorporates release through touch of those parts of the body through very gentle touch. And then moving into the very regulated in hand work, which keeps the horse soft and unbraced in the body. And then the body kind of unravels. and they naturally start to bend their joints and lift and be more careful and thoughtful about what they're doing. But if you're ever tempted to say, oh, look, you're dragging your hind legs, let's create more activity, it has the opposite effect, because then the horse is trying to work against those braced muscles. They might be trying to create more activity, trying to lift. If you do poles, they might be trying to lift their feet over the poles, but they'll compensate elsewhere in the body because there is bracing that is preventing them from using their muscles smoothly.
So when you're working with a horse and rider and helping them experience the benefits of slow walk work, is this complementary to their normal schooling days? So are they just adding this in-hand walk work and a lot more under saddle walk work in addition to walk, trot, canter that would look more typical in a dressage school? Or does this really shift your focus from the other gaits to strictly walk for a period of time?
It doesn't restrict it to strictly walk, but you do have to change your approach, because a part of the reason it works is that the horse learns to be vulnerable around you. So if you're slowing everything down, lightening all your aids, and then they become more present in their body and more aware of everything and more sensitive. If you then kick them on into a fast canter, that's incredibly jarring for them. It breaks that trust and it kind of undoes what you did. So um, you it depends a lot on where the horse is. So if you have a forward going horse who loves to trot and canter and gain some release from it, then I still incorporate those in the session, but I don't work on them as such. If I'm working with a horse that's lazy, I don't ask them to trot or canter until some of those issues have resolved. And then in the long term, you use the walk. So your schooling sessions will change a little bit, because generally speaking, most people do most of the corrections in trot. So that's been my observation, especially in the dressage world, that if your horse is crooked, you'll push them forward on a 20-meter circle and use more inside leg or whatever it is until they sort of straighten out. But my approach would be, if a horse is crooked or if a horse is picking up the wrong canter lead, I don't work on the canter transitions. I take them back to walk. I find out where the crookedness is. I resolve the crookedness in the walk, and then I might go walk to canter and see if that transition's better. So there's less time spent in trot and canter, because the trot and canter is just putting into practice the work that you've done in the walk.
And tell us how the walk work varies from horse to horse. So let's say you do have a horse like the mare you described who is moving in a specific crooked way versus a horse that might be tense in the walk and tends to jig, or all these different issues. Does the approach to making the walk work for you change a lot depending on the horse's temperament and I put issues in quotes, but like
Yeah.
specific challenges that they're facing? Or is it kind of one size fits all in terms of like you follow this program and you can expect things to start getting better and falling into place?
So, in terms of the horse, there's a huge variety in the way people practice it. But in terms of the person, it's the same, because basically what we're doing is we're learning to listen to the horse. So, we're first of all, we learn to match ourselves with the horse so that we can move with it both with in hand and ridden, so that we're able to move with the horse in the way that they're currently moving without influencing them. And that's actually something that people find really surprisingly difficult, because we're kind of conditioned to ask them to do things, to make adjustments, and to micromanage. So that's the first step. And then the next step is to start to create a shared language where you can make suggestions to the horse with light aids. And throughout all of that, you're looking for the horse's response. So we're trying to find um, the lowest pressure option. So if your horse wants to walk fast, you will do your work walking fast with the horse to begin with. If your horse wants to walk slow, and some horses will want to stand for prolonged periods, which is people find quite challenging. Um, so for those horses, I'll generally say set aside a whole session just for standing with your horse, no expectations, and start to notice the things they do when they're standing. So for example, some horses They'll tend to shift between gazing into the distance where they're feeling overwhelmed and they want to just get a bit of release from the intensity of it, and then coming introverted when they'll go sleepy and they'll put their head down and they'll doze, and that's when they're processing what's happening inside their bodies. And then there'll be a little acknowledgement where they come back to you and they're ready to go. So I teach people to spend a session learning about those things and just observing, even if their horse just stands there for half an hour and does nothing, just observing and getting really tuned into what they're doing. So when they gaze, you gaze. When they go internal, you just focus on your grounding. And then when they come back to you, you come back to them, acknowledge them, and then you might ask them to walk. Whereas for the fast horses that are tending to want to go sometimes even faster than you can walk, there's a lot of strategies in terms of how to softly get them to straighten, so that you can find a mutual point of synchronization with them. And if the horse is saying no, so if they're biting with the in-hand work, or if they are refusing to move when you ask them to do something, then you need to change what you do until you can find something that they're okay with. So for some horses, that means beginning in the stable with just the touch, not even doing it the touch in the arena, but doing it in the stable, so that you can unravel those anxieties they've got around touch. And obviously with all horses, there's that the you know investigating any physical causes of problems that they might be having as well. So it's very much not a one size fits all for the horse, but for the person, it's a very similar journey of developing that awareness.
That is really interesting, and I can like, in hearing you speak, I understand how this would establish a really strong connection between horse and rider and kind of a more just not even responsive, but just like in tune with one another experience. So from the mental side of things for both horse and rider, I'm understanding how that can really bring them together and kind of bring them to neutral and more ready to have a productive time together or like a nice time together, a peaceful
Mm.
time together. But talk to us about how this improves the horse's posture or if it improves their like muscle tone. I know you talked about like a ewe neck or just different issues that a horse can have and how their body actually improves. Why does that happen with the slow walk work?
So what you're saying about the connect, so that's actually another of the benefits, that a lot of people start finding the horse comes to the gate and wants to work, or becomes kind of softer and calmer in their temperament. So changes can't really happen until the nervous system is very well regulated. And we are there to help with the regulation of the nervous system. So for us to be very grounded and calm and very attuned to what the horse is experiencing, but also having enough clarity and direction that the horse doesn't feel kind of lost and on their own. So all of those little subtleties in finding the sweet spot where your horse feels safe enough to express themselves, but also not unsafe from lack of direction.
Mhm.
And then the reason why that helps with the posture is because that's the first step to them releasing the muscles that are preventing them from moving correctly. So often, for example, when people talk about building top line, and we've had some really amazing top line transformations through this, but people are often focusing on strengthening. So diet, which obviously nutrition is important, but diet and more exercises and more strengthening to try and build the top line. But generally, the reason why the top line isn't building is because there are muscles, or opposing muscles, which are stopping that top line from building by being too tight. And because all the muscles are connected to one another, if one muscle, especially in the neck and the under neck in particular, if one muscle is very tight, then it impacts all the muscles along the chain from the jaw through to the hindquarters. And so no matter how hard you work those muscles, they're not going to build because they're not being worked smoothly and correctly. So actually the changes that I've had through top line have been generally through short sessions, not intense, not the sort where you get the heart rate up, but just through reprogramming the body. And because it feels so good to the horse as well, they will tend to choose to move in that way more when they're out in the paddock as well. So it kind of the improvement continues to happen even when you're not working with them.
Wow, that's amazing. Tell us, for people listening who I'm sure they're thinking about, like, this sounds wonderful. How could it not? It sounds like, uh, just really good outcomes and a really nice way to get there. I know you have a course that walks people through the application of this, but give us an idea however you'd like. Maybe you could talk about, like, a specific, like, example pretend horse and rider and what it might look like for them to embark on this work and how long it might be. So maybe it's like 2 weeks of in-hand work and then 2 weeks of just walking your schooling sessions, and then you can expect X, Y, and Z. Or just tell us, your general approach so people can get an idea of what the activities are and what the timeline is. And I know this is a long question now, but at the end, is it like now you return to your regularly scheduled programming, the walk work has served its purpose, and now we're back to our walk, track, canter school days?
Yeah, so the course is funny actually because I say it's 7 modules, but it's actually 2 extra modules. There's one preparation type training, the I type module, and then there's another module afterwards, which tells you how to put it all into practice. So it's effectively it's 9 modules. It's for the actual exercises themselves, I recommend at least 1 week per module. And some people take longer, and a lot of people will go back, and this is really important to keep going back to the early modules because that's where the massive difference happens. That's where the foundation is laid for the difference. But yeah, so to begin with, we start off in the first module with just learning to synchronize with your horse's walk and some very basic exercises to establish your communication through light aids. And then we move on to touch, which is things like the arc release, which is the process of opening the pole, releasing the jaw, and all of that sort of stuff. And making sure that the muscles are able to work in the correct order for the horse to lift the forehand, open the gullet, and stretch forward. So that's mostly, and kind of rewinding back from that during that module, we begin just with exploring touch and finding out how the horse likes to be touched and whether they can tolerate touch, and if they find it difficult to tolerate touch, finding ways in which we're able to compromise with them because it needs to feel good for the horse. Then we move on to the 2-hand hold, which is where we work the horse between the reins in hand. So you're walking beside the horse in more of a classical in-hand position. And that's when you start to, a lot of that's about the person just getting used to the coordination of it and just carrying simple exercises. But then also what's often missed out in the teaching of classical in hand is you need to bring forward that connection and synchronization that you started in the first 2 modules. So if you don't bring that forward, you end up with a horse that is biting you or doesn't want to go or wants to kind of move away from you or becomes crooked and rushes and pushes in front of you. So we spend a lot of time on establishing that beautiful, meditative, safe feeling, calm, slow walk, working the horse between the reins. And then we move on to riding, and that starts in the same way. So you're just sitting on the horse. We go into quite a lot of detail about how the horse moves their body, and I have guided audio so that you can ride and just feel the horse moving their body and how your feet and legs and hands move with that. And then we do the same things as we did with in hand. So we start introducing light aids and just very simple directions. And then we go through to the lateral work. So during the lateral work, we begin. I just teach 3 basic lateral exercises, which I find are pretty much enough to do all of your straightening and to teach the horse to start to raise the forehand and use the hind legs. And we do those on foot first without the horse because I don't teach it using specific aids. I develop it from the sense of oneness that you've got through the work you began with. So once you feel like the horse is really moving with you in that slow walk, as I was describing earlier with Sudi, you can it almost feels like you can telepathically think shoulder in, for example, and the horse will do it. That's what we're aiming for. So I get people to walk through it on foot so they really get a sense of what it feels like in their own bodies first. Then we do it in hand, and then we do it ridden. And then at the end, we talk about, because you're asking about Flicker with her specific crookedness, we talk about how to address specific crookedness and specific issues. And yeah, then I think most people, once they've learned that, so some people will just do the in-hand aspect, especially if they're just wanting to help an older horse that is struggling with physical issues. And then some people have bigger goals. Like I had a client recently who was wanting to do canter work in hand, and she went through the slow walk program and achieved some really beautiful canter transitions in hand. But people usually find that once they've learned the technique, they apply it, and they can apply it creatively to lots of scenarios, even kind of things like lunging and long reining. You apply the same kinds of principles and get those same sorts of results from having that real strong solid foundation of synchronization and oneness.
So is it about 50% in hand, 50% under saddle if you do everything in the course?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a little bit more in hand because we have all the touch work as well. So yeah, but basically everything we do in hand, we also do under saddle, apart from the touch work.
And for people who are at levels of their sport, what we could talk about dressage or eventing that demand some amount of fitness. So just, I mean, anything above the lower levels, if they want to embark on 7 or 8 or 9 weeks of the power of walk work, is there a concern about losing fitness, or how do you really commit to the program without losing endurance or
I mean,
strength?
I say to people, maybe do the program when you're not actively competing, because the problem is if you have that goal of needing to go and ride a novice or advanced test that week, and you need to keep the fitness, you need to keep what you've built, because often you'll go back, or it'll feel like go backwards first. And when people have got that in the back of their minds, they can't fully immerse themselves in the program because they've got this little niggling feeling saying, oh, but he's not really got enough activity there, and then I'm going to get penalized in my dressage test if there's not enough activity. So it does require a bit of commitment and a bit of time set aside just to get started. Once you've mastered the technique, it's a tool that you can use forever within your warm-ups. Like you can warm up pretty much all in walk and go in and ride an absolutely beautiful dressage test. So yeah, it does require a bit of commitment and a bit of a mindset shift to start it. And it does require, it's still okay to, if you have a horse that likes hacking, trail riding, depending on what country you're in, depends what you call it. But if you have a horse that
Yeah.
likes riding out, then that's a massive advantage because you can still keep your fitness going on rides out without having to use the strength of leg aids that you might have been used to using in the dressage arena.
And I mean, it 7 or 8 weeks sounds maybe like a long time to be focusing on walk, but really it's such a blink of an eye, and especially when it's something that is meant to build a foundation. And we all have, obviously, like, competing throughout the entire year is not recommended. There's downtime, and
Mm.
a lot of people who are listening are going into a winter season and maybe an
Yeah,
indoor arena season, and it might be a good time to do something like this. There's a saying that I think about for work sometimes, like, you need to go slow to go fast.
yeah.
And this kind of reminds me of that. Like, put in the patience so that you can contribute to, what your other goals are. Um,
The other thing with that as well is that some people do it with a different horse, because a lot of the reason it takes the 7 weeks is because you need to immerse yourself in it as a person. With horses, they respond incredibly quickly to the work. So you can, if you're experienced at doing it, you can get big changes very early on. So if you're wanting to learn it for yourself, you could learn it on a different horse, one that you're not competing or whatever, and then put it into practice with your other horses.
Interesting. So the training is really more so on the human and the human embracing it, and then it's
Yeah.
like the horses are grasping it quicker than the
The
humans.
horses grasp it instantly when you get it. It's like they're
Yeah,
pre-programmed for it. They grasp it instantly. I've been fascinated by that. So many horses I've just got on, and it's like they say, "Oh,
they're
at
ready.
last, you get it."
Yeah, they've been,
So
like,
that
looking for
because
that.
that's already their language is already a quite telepathic language of
Mhm.
noticing very subtle connections, and like when you watch them at play, they mirror each other at play, they move together. I love watching them. It's often quite balletic to watch them. They'll canter in a semicircle in a complete mirror image and come and join each other, or they'll be side by side. That's exactly how they communicate. So when you start to communicate in that way, matching yourself with their nervous system, they already know it. They don't need, they're experts at it already. It's us that need to learn it.
That is really cool. We have Sinead Halpin Maynard is one of our Ride IQ coaches, and she's done a few lessons on like telepathically asking your horse for certain things. And I know members have had just like they underestimate the power of their mind and how the horse can hear and respond to what they're thinking. Going back to planning when a person might do this work, would you consider the like teaching a horse the power of walk, would you consider that kind of downtime for them? And the reason I ask is a lot of people that we've spoken to, a lot of trainers have told us how important it is to let your horse rest and have a vacation and reset, just like humans burn out, horses burn out. Could somebody build the power of walk work into the horse's rest, especially if it's a horse that doesn't like just being in a pasture for a month? Like that way of rest, they get bored. Or do you think that this is in addition to rest because their little wheels are turning and figuring out new things too?
Yeah, I think I definitely wouldn't class it as rest because there's a huge amount of processing that happens. And actually, that's why I keep the sessions short and I encourage people to um, work them, not don't work them every week. It's usually on the day off that they make the most progress. So you could use it as a change if the horse is getting stale with what they're doing.
Mhm.
You could use it as a change, but it's really important for horses to have proper rests. They don't necessarily need to be for long periods, but they need that time of doing nothing to process. And the slow walk work adds another layer of learning, so it doesn't kind of serve as a time to process their other learning, if that makes sense.
Yes. Okay. So this is not in place of a vacation. Your horse
No,
still deserves
sorry.
their vacation.
Yes.
Um, and if I'm visualizing a great slow walk, is there one way that that looks? Like once a horse gets it, does it look truly like a very slow tempo on the hind end, like more of a free walk with the nose out, or does what a good slow walk looks like? Does that vary?
So it varies slightly from horse to horse, but there's a few things in common. So I've actually got a video on YouTube of me and Sudi doing slow walk. I think it's on my YouTube channel, which is called Responsive Equine, which you can look at. But it looks like slow motion. So I get a lot of comments of people saying this has been slowed down. So the main key to it is it looks like slow motion. It literally looks like a video that's been slowed down, and that the footfalls look soft, and it is collected. So it's not on a long rein because the horse has to be incredibly well balanced to step that slowly. So when they're carrying a rider, that balance involves adjusting, as you know, it involves adjusting their weight to carry more on the hind end, to lift the thoracic sling and the forehand and lighten the forehand and reach the front legs out more. So the neck will also be arched and the pole the highest point. But the rein contact will be very, very light, and the leg contact will be very, very light. All the contacts will be light.
I can't wait to watch that video. I bet it's so cool. And so, I mean, the fact that people are saying that it's in slow motion is like such a compliment. You're like,
Yeah.
yeah, we're doing it correctly.
Yeah.
Um, good. I'm excited to look at that. Will you tell us a couple of examples of exercises, maybe in hand or under saddle, that somebody could expect to do while they're working on this?
Yep. So the exercises themselves are very, very simple because we're working on how they are done. So we basically work on walk halt transitions. We work on the transition between let out and pick up. We work on that a lot. That's really key to it because we want the horse to be able to do the full range and feel comfortable within the full continuum of stretch and pick up. And during the sessions, we use that very, very frequently. So we're never expecting the horse to be in a static posture for a long period. And then we do the basic lateral exercises, shoulder in, leg yield, and turn on the haunches are the ones that we focus on.
Okay, amazing. That is super helpful, and I'm sure as people are doing it, they're looking for, like, something different than they would if they were just going to do shoulder in at like, before doing this work, that it will
Yeah.
feel and look different with different
Yeah.
desired outcomes.
Yes, exactly.
Which riders have the hardest time with accomplishing this work? Like, what are the
Um,
attributes of those people that have a hard time?
People that struggle with doing nothing. So, uh, although often these people end up being the very best people, often it's people with ADHD. I'm autistic myself, and I think I have ADHD as well. If but initially that desire to want to keep moving, to keep doing, and to be busy in the mind is very, very difficult because and people some people just find it annoying and painful to have to just stand and do nothing. And it even kind of comes down to when you're standing with the horse, not being tempted to touch them or stroke them or pat them, but being content to just stand. But I've had some absolutely amazing people who have worked on it so much and found that it's affected all areas of their life in a positive way because it's kind of like
Wow.
meditating. So
Yeah,
even though those people often struggle at the start, they're often the people that end up with the most profound benefits in the end.
that is so cool. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's specific to ride IQ or riding or what, but my sister Kinsey and I speak to so many riders and Ride IQ members, and without any sort of prompt, ADHD comes up all the time, just like busy in the mind. And
Yeah.
I can understand why trying this initially would feel so uncomfortable for a busy mind, but yes, be such a gift if you commit to that, if you just commit to it and kind of
Mm.
exercise that muscle.
Yeah, and often those neurodivergent people have very great levels of attunement and awareness. So when they do get it, they get it in a really amazing way.
Yeah. Do you work with riders in person, or do you, like, travel doing clinics, or is almost all of your instruction done through the virtual course?
I have just a very small amount of local clients, and I don't just teach them slow walk work, I teach all of the things, but I incorporate slow walk work. But my passion is the online work because it's people who are really ready to embrace it. Um, I've done a couple of clinics here and there as well, which I absolutely love, but it's a lot doing clinics, it's a lot of
Yeah.
organizing, and so I would like to do a bit more of that in the future. But with the other thing I really love about the online courses, as well as the fact that people are ready and waiting to learn that specific thing, is also that the way that I teach. So I give video feedback as an option on my courses. So
Mm.
that will either be written feedback or in group coaching calls. People submit videos of no more than 3 minutes, and during those videos, I can pause and show the precise moment when they should have released, um, and they can see it for themselves. And it's usually like one thing, like the timing of a release, or the something specific about the posture, or something I noticed about the hind legs, or the way they can watch themselves back and they can see that they slightly tipped forward as they began to walk. And
Mhm.
when people can see that for themselves and just focus on that one little thing and then go back and try it, it often makes way more difference than a full 45-minute lesson with lots of different instructions. So I
Yeah.
think online is such an amazing medium for kind of accelerated learning.
Yeah, I love that. What is it that people are missing in terms of the horse's cue and the release?
Can you say that question again? Sorry.
What are they missing from like, what communication from the horse are they missing if they're not doing a release? Like, if that's a common thing to like, "Oh, you should have released there." What are some of the cues from the horse that indicate time to release?
So usually people release far too late. So for example, um, during the arc release, after we've released all the bracing in the neck, we ask the horse, as part of it, we ask the horse to just lift their head. And what we want is for them to lift their own head when we ask them to. But what people tend to do is they'll try and lift their head up. So they'll lift the reins and then they'll keep lifting. And so I teach people to lift. And as soon as the horse just does the tiniest movement upward, release. So you're teaching them to begin the movement. You're not teaching them to continue it. And what once they can begin it, you can then ask them to begin it again so that when they're doing the lift, they are doing the lift, not you. So that timing of the release makes such a massive difference to the lightness and the self carriage.
Interesting. And once people have done the in-depth initial work in this program, you mentioned that a lot of them will go back to this work later, like, it's
Yeah,
something that you can return to over and over.
yeah.
What does that look like? Like, if you were thinking of a competitive dressage rider who really saw great benefits from this walk work experience that they really committed to and went all in for a period of time, then they go back to regularly scheduled programming. When do they revisit this power of walk work, and what does that look like?
So, I mean, most people continue to incorporate it, but what I've had a few people who have, I've given the option for people to redo the course. I've had quite a few people take me up on that. And what they're doing is, first time round, they were kind of learning it, but second time round, they start to see the nuance and particularly with the postural subtleties. So and I've had a lot of people that have gone back and realized right from the first lesson, oh, I know now why I've started to struggle because I forgot about really making the synchronization good. So there'll be a combination of that, people revisiting it and really, yeah, you have to just keep, I mean, I have to do it as well. I constantly have to remind myself to return to synchronization. I'll feel something going wrong and I'll be like, hang on a minute, I need to take it step back and return to synchronization. But yeah, with people redoing it every time, and people often say this, every time they do it, they notice something different and discover something better. So it's kind of, it's always, always still discovering things as well. It's so amazing how like just the very simplest thing can contain so many subtleties to it, and it just makes me think, wow, you know, people are trotting and cantering and doing flying changes and stuff. Imagine if they could take, when you look at how much you can learn in the walk, imagine if people were taking that through all of their gaits as well. What an amazing transformation they could have. And it's learning that skill of not thinking you've mastered something, but being curious and open to finding new depths all the time, just going back and finding more new depths.
When you think about who the perfect candidate is for doing this work, who do you think of? And on the contrary, we talked about needing like who is not a good fit. So we talked about like the person who doesn't have the time or interest in really committing to being patient and going through a process that takes a period of time. Um,
Mm.
are there other things that would make somebody not a good candidate in this moment for them?
I mean, I think I've had all sorts of different people who have made it work. I think the number one thing is the motivation, and
Mhm.
also one of the hardest things, letting go of the ego. It can be really, really hard when you're being watched because people are like, what are you doing? Get that horse moving. So um, you need to have a little bit of resilience. But I mean, having said that, it's a lovely community and we all offer support. Even if you do feel self-conscious about that, we offer support and suggestions on how to. So I wouldn't say that there's any bad candidate. I suppose when people go in and they're kind of expecting a quick fix and then they get disgruntled when things don't start to be happening, that's generally not a good fit, because it does take self-reflection and self-awareness and humility. So you do need to be ready to be open-minded and ready to try something different and give it a really, really good go and not just give up at the first hurdle.
Would it be a good fit for a pair that is rehabbing and only allowed to walk?
Yeah, absolutely, because it really helps with the rehab process often as well.
I love that because I know that can get so monotonous and feel like, man, we have to wait until we can start making progress, and instead it can
Mm.
turn into like, this is our time to do something really special and different. Um,
Yeah, you can, and you can. So Boucher was one of the first people who kind of had tried or knowingly tried this approach, and he actually had a chandelier fall on him and injure him so badly that he had hardly any strength in his legs, and that's how he stumbled across walking work. He didn't, I think there were some differences, but he did a lot of work in walk and a lot of flexions and things like that, and discovered through the fact he couldn't use strong aids anymore and he had to kind of work in walk, that he could immediately do these more advanced dressage movements without ever having tried them, just straight from working on the walk.
that's very, very cool, and just cool that there are so many just like instances that people can decide to use this and do something different and do something
Yeah.
that can be really transformative and powerful for them and their horse mentally and physically. Something that I love to ask guests on Ask an Expert is to challenge our listeners to do something small, something really simple. So, to give you an example, like we spoke to a fitness coach for riders, and his challenge was choose a point, like maybe the tree at the end of the driveway, and just walk to that point for the next 5 days, or have a big glass of water and drink it before your feet hit the floor in the morning. Just like a little thing to kind of like dip your toe into the topic that we're talking about. Is there a challenge that you can give people who are listening?
Oh, you put me on the spot there.
I know I
Yeah, I
did.
think no, that's okay. We actually just did a series of challenges which I call Slowvember throughout November.
Oh, I
So there's
love
quite
that.
a few on my slow walk work group. I think okay, I'll give one for your not your readers, your listeners. So can you walk one long side of the arena without asking your horse to do anything?
That I bet will prove to be it'll just show everybody how there's so many just kind of like subconscious things that we're all just not even subconscious, but just like we've decided to do that become so hardwired in us to get
Yeah,
involved.
yeah.
I love that. People who give it a try, please let us know how it goes in the Facebook group and if it was challenging and how your horse reacted. With this challenge, is there anything that people should be like observing or wanting in terms of how their horse reacts? Or is it just the challenge for the rider to do nothing?
So it's just a challenge for the rider to do nothing and to notice what happens without trying to change it. For
Okay.
both them and for the horse. So you might notice how it makes you feel, or you might notice something about how the horse responds.
I feel stressed just thinking about it. So I know how it would make me
It's
feel. And
supposed
I
to be
know
relaxing, Jessa.
right, I know. It's clearly, probably something that I could use. Okay, I love that challenge. Anybody who does it, please let us know how it goes. And Diana, for people who want to learn more about your course or find you online or reach out, where can they do that?
So if you go to my website, it's thepowerofwalk.com, and my Facebook group is Slow Walk Work.
Okay, and is the course something that can be self-guided, or is it something that happens like opens a few times a year?
So currently it opens a few times a year, but we're doing a massive reorganize shortly. So there's going to be some different options coming soon.
I love that. Cool. Well, I can't wait to see, and I really hope some Ride IQ members give this a go. It sounds just incredible, and I would love to hear from them what their experience is. And like I said, what a great time of year for a lot of people to embark on it. So again, Ride IQ members, tell us if you get into it and share your experience. And Diana, this alone has been just incredibly valuable and eye-opening and so fun to learn something that I haven't learned about before. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and taking the time.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it.
And thank you everybody for listening. Enjoy the rest of your week and we'll see you next time. Bye guys.